Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a political fight that was, well, definitely not an accident. It was really strategic.
Yeah, strategic confrontation. And the stakes. They included the potential for a permanent purge of the federal workforce. That's huge.
Exactly. We're talking about the October 2025 federal government shutdown. This happened when Republicans controlled both the White House and Congress. Unified control.
Right. And, the usual playbook says the minority party, they almost always lose these shutdown fights.
But this time felt different. For the Democrats, led by Hakeem Jeffries in the House, this shutdown seems to have been a deliberately chosen battleground.
The source material really frames it that way. It suggests a high-stakes strategy with, three main goals. First, unify their own party, which wasn't easy. Second, clearly define the opposition, the Republicans, around one key issue. And third, elevate Jeffries himself onto the national stage, basically overnight.
So that's our mission in this deep dive. We want to figure out how Jeffries and the Democrats actually used this crisis, how they seized the narrative and really transformed him.
Yeah, from being a relatively new leader, Pelosi's successor, into this formidable national opponent for the Trump administration.
It really became his political crucible, didn't it?
It seems so. We've got a stack of analysis here that looks at this shutdown not just as some, appropriations failure, but as a very calculated political move.
Designed to force a fight on their terms.
Exactly. So let's dig into the specific policy stuff first.
Yeah.
The tensions that made Democrats feel this fight was, well, necessary. Maybe even existential.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. What were the Democrats actually fighting for? It wasn't just some abstract number on a budget sheet.
No, not at all. The absolute core of the conflict was their demand to address what they were calling a Republican healthcare crisis. That was the framing.
And they refused to fund the government unless they got movement on, two specific things?
Precisely. Two key policy fronts. First, the looming expiration of the Enhanced Affordable Care Act premium tax credits. The ACA subsidies.
Right, and these weren't minor things for people. The sources warned that if these expired, premiums were going to skyrocket. We're talking maybe 20 million Americans impacted.
Yeah, potentially huge increases, like 40–50% hikes for middle-class families. It was immediate real-world pain they were pointing to.
Okay, so that's one. What was the second demand?
Reversing deep cuts to Medicaid. These cuts had been sort of tucked into that big bill passed earlier, the one big ugly bill, as it was called.
Yeah.
Democrats saw this shutdown as basically their last shot to force a vote, to stop that financial pain before it really hit millions of families.
And the Republican response. Speaker Johnson.
Pretty predictable. They insisted on a clean, continuing resolution, just fund the government, deal with policy later. They called what the Democrats were doing hostage-taking. Standard shutdown language.
But the stakes felt higher this time, didn't they? Why was it so uniquely existential for the Democrats? Why not just wait it out like usual?
Because the Trump administration had changed the game. A shutdown wasn't just a temporary funding pause anymore. It had become this profound threat to the federal administrative state itself.
You mean because of that new department, the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE?
Exactly, DOGE, reportedly helmed by Elon Musk, aiming to slash the federal workforce. The name sounds almost like a joke, but the goal was serious.
Identify jobs, agencies, for elimination.
Right. And President Trump himself said publicly he'd use the shutdown as a pretext for layoffs. He even added, they're going to do Democrats.
Wow. So not just furloughs with back pay later, this was potentially permanent removal, a purge.
That's the key difference. Remember those changes to civil service rules? Easier to fire career employees. So the government shuts down, the administration starts around, reduction in force actions, RIFs, using DOGE's lists. They could argue positions were redundant, fire people, and those jobs just wouldn't come back.
So for Democrats, this became about defending the civil service itself, its stability, its neutrality.
Absolutely. It was like a preemptive strike against potentially dismantling whole agencies. Much higher stakes than just a funding gap.
Okay, so facing this double threat healthcare crisis, attack on the civil service Democrats made a big shift. They went from being risk-averse to, calculated confrontation.
Yeah, and that shift came directly from a pretty painful failure just 6 months earlier. You have to understand that context.
Right. The March 2025 fiasco. Tell us about that. What happened there?
Well, back then, Senate Leader Chuck Schumer managed to avert a shutdown. He cut a deal, passed a Republican-friendly funding bill relatively quickly.
And you'd think averting a shutdown is good, right?
Politically, it was a disaster for him. He faced this absolutely furious backlash from progressives. Even former Speaker Pelosi was critical. The base felt Democrats just folded again.
So not using the leverage they had.
Exactly. The feeling was they always took the political hit just to avoid a fight. There were even calls for Schumer to resign from some big activist groups. Painful lesson learned.
So avoiding the fight was actually riskier than having it. That makes sense.
It seems so. So this time, Jeffries and Schumer worked out a joint strategy really early. They were constantly appearing together, projecting this image of, seamless coordination and resolve.
That unified front between the House and Senate leaders was key. Show Republicans they couldn't just divide and conquer.
Definitely. And it showed impressive internal skill from Jeffries, too. He wasn't just managing Schumer, he had to manage his own caucus.
Because some members wanted to fight on more issues, right? The climate, maybe border stuff.
Yeah, there were definitely members pushing to broaden the demands. But Jeffries apparently stayed on point. He gave this really clear message internally.
What was that?
Something like, well, if Democrats were going to lean into the fight, we need to win the fight. Meaning, pick one clear issue you can actually win the messaging war on.
And that issue was healthcare. Simple, direct impact on families, easier to frame morally.
Exactly. Much harder for Republicans to paint that as some fringe progressive demand compared to, say, complex climate regulations. It was a calculated choice for maximum public impact.
And this tougher stance, it played well with the base this time, after the March disappointment.
Yeah. The sources say groups like Indivisible, Move On, they were cheering them on. It reconnected the leadership in D.C. with that grassroots energy that wanted to fight.
So the shutdown happens, and this becomes the stage for Jeffries' command performance, as the analysis calls it. He really used the media spotlight.
He really did. Disciplined, relentless, very effective. It basically cemented his national reputation in a matter of weeks.
What stood out about his communication?
The message discipline was just remarkable. He anchored everything to one simple slogan, repeated constantly. Cancel the cuts, lower the cost, save healthcare.
Catchy. Policy, attack, promise, all in one.
Exactly. And he kept framing it as a moral battle over this Republican healthcare crisis, not just some D.C. procedural fight over budgets.
Yeah.
Elevated the whole thing.
Which must have been crucial when the attack started coming his way.
Oh, absolutely. He was hit with this intense hostile media campaign from the White House and its allies. But he stayed, calm, forceful, articulate.
Creating a contrast?
Yeah, the sources point out a stark contrast with what they call the erratic messaging from the administration. Jeffries came across as the steady one.
And then things got really personal, really ugly with that deep fake video.
Ah, yes. The AI-generated video President Trump posted, depicting Jeffries with a sombrero, fake mustache, just overtly racist.
That takes it beyond policy instantly. How did Jeffries handle that?
That was maybe the defining moment. He didn't shy away. He used it to elevate himself, confronting Trump directly.
What did he actually say? The sources highlight a specific response.
He issued this public challenge, basically saying, the next time you have something to say about me, don't cop out through a racist and fake AI video. When I'm back in the Oval Office, say it to my face.
Oh, wow. That's direct.
It's a power move, right? An opposition leader needs to be seen as a credible equal, not just someone being attacked by the president.
So by responding like that, man to man almost.
Exactly. He reframed it. From Trump punching down to two leaders on a more equal footing, it created this really strong narrative of personal courage, standing up to a bully, powerful political theater.
Okay, so at the end of the day, this whole Democratic strategy, it was a huge gamble, right? It all depended on winning the public opinion battle, shifting the blame. Did it work?
Well, if you look at the polling data, the answer seems to be mostly yes. They largely won the blame game, which in shutdown politics is basically winning.
What did the polls show specifically?
A key Washington Post poll found 47% blamed President Trump and the GOP. Only 30% blamed Democrats. That's a pretty significant gap, especially since Democrats initiated the fight.
And what about independents, the swing voters?
Even more telling there. Independents were more than twice as likely to blame Republicans, 50% blaming the GOP versus just 22% blaming Democrats.
So the healthcare framing really cut through. It connected the shutdown pain back to the Republican agenda for those voters.
It seems like it worked exactly as they hoped. It made the GOP look responsible for the disruption because of their underlying policies.
And this whole episode, it did wonders for Jeffries personally, didn't it? His profile.
Oh, absolutely. Remember, before this, polls showed something like 45% of Americans had never even heard of Hakeem Jeffries. That kind of anonymity. It's a killer if you want to be speaker or more.
Right.
So by being the main voice, the chief messenger, getting wall-to-wall media coverage for weeks, The shutdown basically acted like this massive free ad campaign for him.
Solved his name recognition problem overnight. He went from a house guy to a national figure.
Pretty much, it was a rapid transformation.
But hang on. There was that New York Times Siena poll. Didn't that find most voters, like 2/3, didn't actually want Democrats to force a shutdown over policy?
That's a really important counterpoint. It shows the risk, right? People hate shutdowns. The tactic itself was unpopular.
So Jeffries was walking a tightrope.
A very fine line. He had to satisfy his base that demanded the fight, but do it over an issue healthcare that was popular enough with the broader public to make them blame the other side for the resulting chaos.
So winning the blame game, even though people dislike the shutdown itself, that shows some serious strategic skill.
I think that's the takeaway. The unpopularity of the tactic was outweighed by the perceived stakes, the healthcare costs, and maybe even more fundamentally, that threat to the civil service from DOGE.
So the shutdown wasn't just chaos for chaos's sake. It was framed as the only tool left to fight a bigger problem.
Exactly. He wasn't choosing chaos, according to this analysis. He was using the only weapon he had against what Democrats defined as a more dangerous institutional chaos being pushed by the administration.
So pulling it all together, what's the lasting impact here? It looks like the 2025 shutdown really marks Jeffries' transition, right? From just being Pelosi's successor to being a leader proven on the national stage.
Yeah, I think that's fair. He solidified his position, he unified the party, at least for that moment, kept them disciplined, and showed he had the personal toughness to go toe-to-toe with a very aggressive president.
And strategically, looking ahead.
Well, his strategy basically set the terms of engagement for the next election cycle. He boiled down a complex fight into a really simple, powerful narrative.
Democrats defending healthcare and government stability.
Versus Republicans as, quote, chaos agents trying to tear things down. That became the central contrast.
In that line, he used cruelty as the point when it comes to the Republican Party. That really became the soundbite summarizing that whole frame, connecting policy to motive.
Exactly. It was concise, memorable, and tied everything together.
Okay, so the source material really sees this as Jeffries' defining moment. Here's a final thought then, something for you, the listener, to chew on.
Considering how shutdowns changed here, from temporary furloughs to this threat of permanent purges, DGE, the attack on the civil service, what does it mean when the minority party starts to strategically accept shutdowns as a necessary tool?
What does that signal about the future of just basic governing and maybe the end of the traditional budget process as we knew it? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about.
You've been listening to The Deep Dive, where we analyze the stories shaping America and the world. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.